so we had our first guest ever.
We had our first guest ever, and very special guest for us, and like the perfect one to kick this thing off in terms of having guests on here.
Yeah, which is a fun and exciting new format for the podcast. We're just in total experimental mode. Sometimes we record them in the car. Sometimes we record them here at Chill Country Studio. And sometimes we have guests now.
Yes. And so our first guest was Ana Rodriguez. She is a licensed clinical therapist. She has a mission to inspire and empower individuals to transcend antiquated self-perceptions, connecting Western scientific principles with Eastern and indigenous philosophies and holistic health practices to facilitate comprehensive healing and growth.
I'm in.
I'm fucking in too. That is what I've been looking for my entire life, honestly, is like the Western stuff is awesome, but so is the Eastern stuff.
Yeah,
And
she has an excellent balance of both.
Exactly. And so she's been my personal therapist for about 2 years now, and has walked me through both EMDR, cognitive behavioral, and ketamine-assisted therapy. And then she was your therapist for a little bit as well.
She was my first therapist after I realized I needed therapy. I now go to a different therapist out in Lakeway, but yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah, she's amazing. She has a ton of experience, not just with Western therapy, but also with like psychedelic therapy
and the indigenous practices and kind of the ceremonial aspects of how these different plants have been used throughout human history. And so she had a lot of historical context and kind of like connected to her roots, Latin American roots.
She's trained with people in the jungle. She's like done the shit. And she's able to hold space for someone like me who wants to maintain some deference to Western medicine and to the scientific method. You will hear her speak extremely like eloquently and knowledgeably about both sides of that spectrum. And she's done an incredible job of marrying the two so that someone like me can get like the help that I need.
Yep.
So like it's truly holistic and not in like a South Austin hippie, like, oh yeah, just eat turmeric kind of way. It's like truly holistic.
Truly holistic. Yeah.
Like, no, there's science, but there's also more than science.
And I think it comes from an understanding that it's all the same. What words do you want to use to describe the things we're talking about? We can use science words or we can use indigenous words. It's the same thing.
Exactly.
So without further ado.
So yeah, she's the founder and and lead clinician for a practice called Selva Wellness Collective. And they have a location in South Austin. And they're actually opening a second location up, I believe, in Round Rock here in the next couple weeks.
It would be fun to have her back and talk more about her entrepreneurial journey because she started as a solo freelance, I don't know what you refer to it as, like a freelance practice where it was just her doing therapy out of her house. Now she has a proper facility. She's got a team.
She has 7 people.
Yeah, she's doing the thing.
Yeah.
And it's all through a complete life dedication to a mission of helping people heal.
Yeah, in fact, she on the pod she talks a little bit about like how do you balance accessibility and capitalistic growth with like trying to be helpful, and it's an interesting thing that she's having to wrestle with. Yeah, and it's fun to see somebody deal with that.
So I said, without further ado, then we did some ado.
Yeah, that's an ado.
So without further ado, Ana Rodriguez. Hey, y'all, this is Madison. Just a quick note before we get into the episode. We had some slight technical difficulties, and the audio from my microphone did not record properly. Ana's audio and Chris's audio sounds great. Mine, not so great, but the episode overall is awesome, and I hope you enjoy it.
This is a safe place. It's a place where we can feel free sharing our feelings. Think of my office as a nest in a tree of trust and understanding.
I was sitting there, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like very similar to the language we use in EMDR. Very similar to the language we use with taking accountability for yourself.
Or what they say in Landmark, or
Yes.
like all these fucking things.
The way they twist it. Yeah, the way they twist it to where it's like a gaslighty version of these really powerful tools like NLP and EMDR and different things where you're like, it's almost like it helps, I guess, but now I'm not actually sure what's left or right.
It's terrifying. Like,
it is terrifying.
That's why there is like cult specific therapy.
Yeah.
Like
it's also kind of reminds me of the idea of like taking psychedelics rogue versus doing them under the guidance of somebody that knows what they're doing, where you do the preparation, you do the experience, and then you do the integration, because it's such like a powerful fire hose of information that if you don't have any structure to it, if you don't have any intention, any like preparation, then it's just going to be super confusing. So you could also use that power in a way that is intentionally confusing people so that you can tell them whatever the fuck you want.
100%. I mean, we see that all the time in different big groups, especially in the spiritual communities in Austin, where I have deep friends and deep connections to, and yet it gets really confusing because on one end they're spiritual leaders, and then on the other end there's a lot of different kinds of
got to look at the incentives.
Around.
Yeah,
the incentives. I know for us too, I was just having a few of the women at the ketamine-assisted shadow work retreat this weekend in Fredericksburg. They were like, can I be honest with you? Like, I've done ketamine, like, not in therapy, and I've done these other things, and I'm like, totally great. They're like, what's the difference? Especially a couple of them doing it for the first time. And I was like, well, one, they're all non-specific amplifiers. So depending on where you're at in your mental health.
Psychedelics are non-specific amplifiers?
Yes.
What does that even mean?
Psychedelics are essentially non-specific amplifiers. So they amplify what's already there within you. So a couple things. The first is the set and setting that you're in. So if you're at a festival at Burning Man, and I'm going to make it a little complicated, and you're just dealing with a sexual assault violation, that set and setting is going to be really confusing. And there's a lot of layers that your psyche's already walking into. Your nervous system is already percolating and having a lot there. And then also there's a lot of stimulation. And so oftentimes when you're on the medicine, and I would say in that setting, you're more on a substance, even though some people would argue with me. The reason that you're on the substance is because you are getting non-specifically amplified all of things that are around you. And that's fine. It can enhance your experience. You can have a good time. You can play. You can have pleasure. Awesome. And yet what might also be coming up if you're not aware, which I actually have quite a bit of clients that come with a lot of psychedelic harm done, is because they don't realize the other component of the other half, which is it's the internal amplification as well. So they come to me and they're like, all of a sudden I'm in this situation and I'm looking at these men that aren't doing actually anything to me. They're just dancing around, and I'm having a whole thing going on underneath. Dude. And then I can't get off the train, and I have to kind of just go through, and then I'm actually re-traumatizing myself. Exactly. And so it just gets really confusing. So by the time they step in my office and I'm like, I do psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. Like, that's a really amazing modality for what you're bringing in. And they're like, ooh, I don't know, because they have all of these experiences. So in our container, the reason why it's comfy cozy, the reason why I'm doing all the prep, the reason why I'm setting up a respect, which essentially comes from the indigenous wisdom I've learned, is a profound respect of this medicine that from the beginning of time, indigenous communities have literally been working, like only shamans even had access to this at some point, not the normal community. Like, you had to be raised and trained since very young to have a respect around knowing what these medicines were doing. They were literally called the flesh of the gods. And so when you're talking about these different power players in the community that use this, flesh of the gods for twisted reasons, when in fact we actually really need to be like, no, we're dealing with profound medicine that has, all of the mycelium connections to the earth and globe. Like, this, do we want to use it for play? That's your choice. But do we want to actually do the harder work, which is go inside internally, have nothing throwing us off on the external, except for maybe a playlist that's curated to bring up and amplify what's already there, which, as you see when we do our ketamine sits, right, we start and we have kind of waves to facilitate these experiences and bring things to the surface. But you can't hide when you have a, what do you call them? Eye mask. When you have an eye mask on and we have headset on and you're laying down and the entire experience is held by, a trauma-informed facilitator who's like, stay in, keep looking. The only way out is through. Don't get outside of yourself. That's some healing.
Yes. Yes, and that's what makes it so
Dude, I've been trying.
makes it so difficult to navigate from like a should it be legal or not standpoint, because there's so many people that have either had no experience with it at all and they've only like heard experiences from other people, or they've had negative experiences. And most people, almost everybody who's had a negative experience with cannabis, psilocybin, or any of the psychedelics did too much in the wrong setting.
Mm-hmm.
And the right amount, the right setting, the right preparation, the right intentions, and the right integration afterwards is, it's like, it's so hard to be like, well, you have to do all these things instead of like, just take the Xanax.
Yeah.
Dude, it's also like I've always been very confused. That was awesome. I've always been very confused about why I have so many friends that have done so many psychedelics and are still totally fucked up and unhappy. And that explains a lot of it. It's like, unless it's either it can be a substance or a medicine, and it's like depends on.
Yeah. Well, and let's look at, if you're open to sharing, let's take you, for example, like the way the prep and the integration is, I always actually say is more important than the sit itself. The sit itself offers the ability to get outside of the default mode of consciousness and explore and have these sensations in this altered reality, which is so powerful. But just like, you know, once again, the shadow work retreat, it's in my mind because we just came back from it this past weekend, but these women were having...
What is shadow work?
Shadow work, great question. Everybody has different definitions of what shadow work is. So some people think it's just trauma work. For me, the word shadow work is anything that's hidden in the psyche that's still not quite known or seen. So there's things about your symptoms right now, maybe fear of public speaking, but we don't necessarily know what's actually at the root of it that's still in the shadows. And so when I say we're going to do shadow work, I mean it in a general way to say we're going to go in this internal odyssey and explore and shine light and be curious about what's still hidden in your body, in your mind. That's what I say shadow work. So this ketamine assisted shadow work was essentially everybody came in with different intentions, whether it was like, help me learn how to play more. Like that's something that's in the shadows for a lot of us, or a more specific one around inner child wounding or things like that, which is a little bit more obvious. But these women were having really wild scenes, and without the proper integration on the other end of it, if I was a crazy person, I could have really, especially because the suggestibility is so high afterwards when the neuroplasticity is also really open, I could have been like telling them weird stuff around how to interpret their own experience versus having the container of being held safely and helping them lead themselves, almost more in a Socratic questioning modality, and really holding the container of somatic knowledge and experiencing it, getting them back to themselves of what they really experienced, what the theme was, what the felt sense was. They really are like, oh my gosh, I didn't actually even connect that pretty much the entire journey was not anything what I thought I was going to get. I didn't think it was connected to what I thought the intention was going to be anyways, which was already kind of scary because we're doing intentions around like self-worth and the hardest pieces of ourselves that we can't figure out in normal talk therapy. So you're really setting up to do some hard stuff. And then on the other end of it, they're like, wow, I didn't get what I thought I wanted, but I got exactly what I needed.
That seems to be how those things work.
Exactly.
I've done 3 different ayahuasca retreats. The first time I found this group and just kind of vetted them best I could, and then went out there by myself. I didn't know anybody, and it was the most confusing experience of my entire life. And by the end of it, I went in very confused because it was like at this like the tail end of my last company. And after the weekend was over, I was more confused than when I went in. But I didn't even like have any idea of like, oh, I need a therapist. So I was kind of I did the ceremony with facilitators, but I did the preparation and the integration rogue. I still got a lot out of it, but I think I would have, I still got, profound takeaways, right? That like propelled me into the direction that like now we're here. But it took a very long time to make sense of the first ceremony because I had no other guidance on like the front and back end. And then I went back and did it again in 2023, and I actually made it through the whole thing. And the Sunday cacao ceremony was like this glorious like glow on the weekend, and then I understood. It was like, oh, like the whole thing is the ceremony.
Yes.
From like, and they even say like after you send the Venmo for your payment, they're like, the ceremony has begun.
Exactly. I call it the portal. As soon as there's an energetic commitment, stuff starts to come up and move, and synchronicities start to align, especially with ayahuasca.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then and for that one, it was like this. The biggest takeaway afterwards was like, oh, maybe I do have some unresolved trauma. Because Chris and I had been working in the company for 3 years, and like, he has a crazy backstory, right? That is
It's just obvious in terms of where the
like,
trauma
you
is.
obviously had a
Right.
lot of trauma.
Yeah.
I did not. My trauma was less obvious,
Right.
but it's also relative, right? And so I did ayahuasca for the third time, and this time I had an actual. I'd been going to therapy. I got to work with her on an intention going in and prepping for it. Because of that structure on the front end and back end, it makes it work so much better and makes it make so much more sense, because otherwise it's just this like crazy, super confusing fever dream that you're just like sitting there. It's like, is that even real? What did I fucking experience? So yeah, just the power of like, but that's what makes it so complicated, because pharmaceutical medicine is so easy. Take this every day. You know, it's asking questions.
It's clean. It's not messy.
Which I would say a certain amount of the population, that's all that they have resources, whether
Yeah, or
that's
space
financial
to do,
resources
yeah.
or emotional space to be able to do. And that's like great and a choice. And there's also like choose your adventure. Choose your adventure. Do we want to do? I have some friends that are like, you've done ayahuasca how many times? And like, where have you gone? And I'm like, it's changed the course of my entire life.
You've done ayahuasca how many times?
No, I'm not gonna say it's a lot. It's a lot of times. It's a lot of times, and I've done it all around the world. I've done it with different kinds of shamans. The first time I did it with a best friend of mine who's also a psychedelic assisted therapist. I do a lot of retreats with her, different kinds of medicine and non-medicine, and we went to a shaman in Mexico. And it was one of those where I was in the middle of my Reiki mastery journey. So I used to be like a really Western therapist, like cognitive behavioral therapist, pretty clear cut. Even coming from Colombia and having that background, I really hadn't interweaved or interwoven the philosophies that I lived by. I kept it very much like you're a clean slate in therapy. You know, you show
like very
up.
clinical.
Very clinical. A lot of, I think, what you're going to get, because that's how we're trained.
It's a great foundation.
Great foundation. And when I started actually doing more EMDR more intentionally, and then I also started to do I was like in my private practice at that point. I had less hospital work, and I noticed that when I was doing EMDR, there would be a lot of themes that would start to feel like a pattern. So oftentimes people would be talking about voicelessness, and I'd ask, where do you feel that in your body as part of the preparation? I'd be like, I feel it here, or the loss in your heart, or different kinds of wounding in parent and sibling relationships, and all of a sudden they'd feel it in their gut. And I was like, after a while you start to connect the dots, and I was like, I wonder if that has anything to do with chakras, like where energy and the psycho-spiritual development starts to happen. So that led me into my Reiki mastery, which was like a whole nother 5 years. And
Is Reiki real?
Is Reiki real? That's a whole nother question. So Reiki actually comes from an entire modality. Originally, the way I learned it was from the Japanese modality. I completely believe in Reiki. I think there's people who are more channeled to actually be able to move energetics in a similar way that you see different kinds of expert meditators or monks in like the peaks of really cold mountains that can actually regulate their own body temperature. Like that's internal Reiki. So like there's evidence to the fact that actually shows that. I've been able to get people's nervous systems really calm in certain spaces. I get really woo about it to where I can also like see things and see metaphor. And
how do you navigate talking about that kind of stuff, knowing that so many people will instantly shut off when they hear the word Reiki or chakras?
I like to think of myself as a translator. So 50% of my clients, maybe a little bit more now, because the more I've become more self-expressed as a healer and opened up from being so clinical at the beginning, you start to see that my personality. So even if you might not know my personal details, my heart, you know a little bit about what's going on, because the more comfortable I've gotten as a healer, the more I'm going to go do ayahuasca, and so you'll get clients that also meet more or less and appreciate the philosophy. But I don't, by any means, in a therapy session, or even when I'm doing conferences and stuff, I really note the set and setting. So I really know, who am I speaking to? How can they hear me in a way that actually They can still respect what I'm saying. Their defensive strategies and their defensive protective mechanisms will actually hear me. I'll be able to actually move through some of these. So whether that I can explain things in a very metaphysical, like scientific sense, in a very like neural pathways and this, and I can really explain in that way. Or if you want me, they're a yoga instructor and they want to hear about the chakra development, great, we can talk about it that way too, which I think is really a good translator, because all of it, at least in my perspective, it all comes down to very similar concepts. And really we're showing that a lot of spiritual concepts are now being proven by science. A lot of, existential mystical experiences that are now being able to be actually scaled and measured, are connected to when, the psilocybin studies that they did with all of the religious figures, like they're really starting to interweave and explain one another. And more of that's happening. I was telling you the other day and you're like, what is that woo-woo shit? I was like, no, this is like actual research around frequency being able to kill cancer cells. Like, I was like, no, this is actually like real research. And I'm just using different wording. So I hear that. It's like, I don't want to, have my own personal beliefs. Like, nobody likes that feeling where it's like kind of overriding, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, you're hogwash, like you're too woo-woo. That's not fun.
So, all right, nobody knows what the hell's going on here, right?
Yeah.
We all just popped up and we can like piecing it together.
It's true.
It's a giant mystery. Right?
Yes.
If you were to sum up, like, what do you think this is? What do you think is going on?
It's actually one of my favorite questions, and especially with like really depressed clients or very highly anxious clients, like anybody that has a hard time staying in their bodies. Go on. I actually lead up in a way always, and I'm surprised I'm sure I've asked you this at some point, maybe even a couple years ago. I say, all right, I have a homework assignment for you. And they're like, what? I might have asked you this too. And I was like, what's the purpose of us being here? And they're always like, what? And even like my execs, like, professional athletes, all of it. What's the purpose of us being here? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, just actually sit and think about it for a second. They're like, maybe to help one another. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's a great start. Like, what else? People give me other ideas, like to make the world a better place, or to procreate, or to become a capitalistic entrepreneur that makes a shit ton of money and lives in freedom and happiness as America has sold. It's like, great, that's a great start. And then I'm like, go home and think about this. I'll see you in 2 weeks. And then they come back and they're like, it's been driving me crazy. I'm like, talk about it with your wife, talk about it with whoever, like, come back. And then I just kind of slowly drop in. I'm like, this is totally my belief here. But from, 12 years of being a therapist and like helping people and learning, coming from a very traditional, conservative, evangelical Christian perspective, all the way to where I am now. What's the purpose of us being here? Soul growth. I believe that we're souls incarnated in human meat suits here to learn and have soul growth experiences. Everybody has a different lessons we need to learn. Everybody chooses our avatars and the sibling order and the parents we're going to have for soul growth experiences. I think it can get really tricky, which leads into deeper, darker, and very existential conversations about childhood trauma and why we, if we chose these bodies, then why did these horrible things happen to me as I experienced, which just further leads into really beautiful conversation that then leads us to this place of coming back to ourselves in this way that I think connects to the divine and connects to our own accountability in this really inner collaboration kind of way to go about it. If not, we get really nihilistic and why are we here? And then I don't want to do anything at all. And it's like, well, if it's a soul growth experience, what do I actually really want to learn when I'm down here? And it gives people a sense of agency to be like, I want to learn what it's like to really like love others. Great. How are you not doing that well right now?
It's so interesting because that aligns exactly with what I've personally concluded.
Yeah.
And it's like that conclusion is like we talk about, or I refer to it as like, I think this is a boot camp for the soul.
Yeah.
And I use boot camp specifically because some of the shit is really gnarly.
Yeah.
Right? And if you're an eternal soul that just continues to incarnate forever, then it's like you kind of want to, it's like there's hard lessons and there's like, I guess, easier lessons, but
yeah. And if you're, don't even believe in the fact that you're a soul, it still leads to really wonderful conversation about like, okay, well, but I'm like here anyways. So essentially it all really comes down to soul growth and making meaning. You know, I think of like Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, like the worst case situation of the worst possible set of circumstances you can imagine. And yet we still have this search for meaning, which is, I think, the beautiful combination of what do we actually need in order to grow our souls? What do we actually need to learn the boot camp lessons is to actually make meaning of things. So to make meaning of the hard things that have happened in our lives in our childhood, to make meaning of why we ended up going back to similar relationship patterns over and over again, to understand and make meaning why, you know, your child is, you know, activating you so much and causing you to get frustrated. And that meaning making is so important. And if so many of us are distracted and just looking at our phones, so many of us are distracted and just in survival mode, so many of us are distracted and genuinely oppressed, so we don't have the capacity to even think about this stuff, it makes me really sad to think about people not being able to like grow within themselves and find meaning in life, which is why I do what I do. I also think, I love this, just to add another tidbit to this piece, if we're getting into metaphysics, I also think part of why we're here, which is one of my reasons I love to teach this embodiment in therapy, is we have really been programmed in the last civilization of like the masculine really taking a lead collectively over the feminine. And by concepts, what I mean by that is the masculine, you know, just very much like the industrial movement, everything that we're really seeing that we can explain, physical strength, the body, versus more of the feminine, which is more of the intuitive, the feeling, the felt sense, the natural, the cycles, the nature, all of that. And it feels very, very out of equilibrium. And we've all been collectively traumatized by that reality. And so we've been disembodied for so long that so many people, if not every single client I've ever had, walks into my sessions with meanings or beliefs that emotions are dangerous, that they don't even know. I mean, I have like so many lawyers, so many executives, all of us, and I'm like, hey, like, what are you feeling in your body? And they're like, I don't even know how to conceptualize that question. What feelings do you have? And they can only maybe describe the 6 basic: anger, sad, happy, you know, and even then that's hard. This ability to have emotional vocabulary and understand that that's actually where it takes us into deeper wisdom and deeper transformation is through the body in collaboration with our emotions and with our body, versus staying out of pain, trying to keep ourselves comfortable. It's actually the opposite. It's about going internal, like we were talking earlier, feeling through things that actually leads to wisdom and transformation and alchemization of emotions. If emotions are energy in motion and we're literally stuffing them down all the time, no wonder we have the illnesses that we have. No wonder we have the mental health issues that we have. And we're down here in many ways, I think, in this era to learn what it's like to come back to our bodies and to reclaim that, like, that's actually a really important part and actually quite natural. And I love it. I love how many men end up finding me. I actually didn't want to work with men when I first started. I worked at like a women's eating disorder hospitalization program. So I worked mainly with women, very disembodied women, because eating disorders primarily and disordered eating in general, wonky relationships with food are really just a metaphor and a parallel almost identically to what's going on in your relationship with emotions. And so at first I was like, yeah, I don't want to work with men. And then slowly but surely, I think the first man I ever had ended up like being suicidal, and I had to like call police to like come and grab him. Like, it was a whole initiation for me, but I loved him and he was great. And I actually ended up realizing, like, wait a second, I have a pretty good personality type to be like funny and direct and also like maternal and nurturing at the same time, to like call people out. And it's been a really fun journey over the last 10 years. It's actually turned into quite a favorite population of mine that I want to like write books about, is like the secret lives of men in therapy.
I've definitely gravitated towards like, I can't imagine having a man therapist, honestly. Like I and then the ayahuasca group, that it's all women.
Is it?
It's usually like 3 or 4 women facilitators, and that's like the right. I think that's the right energy for me to deal with emotions.
Yeah, I've gone to both. I think when right after my divorce back in my early 20s, I was like, what just happened? I don't know what happened in my life. And I was like, I think I need to see a man, because that energy might bring up stuff that a woman might not,
Yeah.
like whether it's projection or whether it's safety stuff that I didn't know I had. And their particular feedback sometimes was appropriate, sometimes wasn't, but I appreciate it for that point in my life. And yeah, I think it's really a important question to ask yourself when you're thinking about a good fit. It's about compatibility, and it's also about, like, is there a reason why you steer clear of males? Like, might that be actually kind of interesting to play with at a retreat?
To lean into.
To lean into. Or is it already hard enough, the therapy you're going to do? Just, like, go to somebody that, your body's going to feel comfortable and safe with from the beginning. Like, really choose your own adventure here. Yeah.
What do you think about when you think about God? Like, what is God to you?
Great question. I actually was talking about this similarly in my vows I just did.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I just got back a few weeks ago. And we did like these 5-minute vows on longer.
5 minutes?
10-minute vows. It was long. They were long. And that was the point. I was like, we're actually here to make a covenant to each other. Like, let's go. And I did all of these parts of, like, 4-year-old me. This is the way that I viewed love, like spaghetti bolognese and, and then 10-year-old me, and then 20-year-old me viewed love as really backwards and like very emotional and avoidant and anxious attachment all over the place. So I view my relationship with God very similarly. When I was 4, God was the energy that I felt at night that was undescribed. And then when I was 5, it was the Catholic Church and what was indoctrinated in me. But it was also the beauty of watching my grandparents take us to nursing homes and be able to like pour into people that were forgotten. And then it was the evangelical movement of me getting super indoctrinated into that idea. And then same with college, it was like, wait a second, there's a lot of boxes and I don't know how I feel about all these boxes. And so I started getting myself out. But those boxes in that matrix ended up being this, ring by spring college. This is what you do. This is what God wants for you. And then I ended up on an island on the first day. I don't think either of you guys know this. It's in the prologue of the book I'm writing. First day of my honeymoon. My marriage was already over. So I'm like in my young 20s. I get married to this guy. I was very attached to his family. There were so many messages my body was trying to send me that it wasn't a good fit. But I was so in my wounding and really, thought this is what God wanted and just totally gonna go for it. And first day of my honeymoon, I found his phone. I found out he was gonna like leave me the day we got back in the airport. He was about to go on a business trip and like it turned into this whole thing. And I was stuck on this island because there's crazy hurricanes. So I was actually trapped with him for 2 weeks.
Oh my God.
After I found this whole thing out, and I'm like so traumatized. And I come home and I just remember looking at myself, and this actually came up in ayahuasca in one of these moments. I'm like sitting on the beach looking at like one of the most beautiful oceans I've ever seen, just like totally broken, and just repeating, I don't understand. Like, how did I get here? Like, what? Like, I thought this is what God wants. Like, I don't understand. And so in that, my definition of God at that time was a pretty disembodied version where it was very about what I thought it should look like. And it completely deconstructed my entire reality. I'm actually grateful for him now. We've made repairs like 8 years later, and we were both young.
Yeah.
We were both young. He was in his own weird stuff. I was avoiding other things, and hurt people. So it's all good now. But at that point, it was like the biggest thing, like so much rupture. I mean, I was like in bed for 6 months. I was just completely devastated. And what I came to recognize was like, I need to deconstruct. I needed to deconstruct what this means. And I started this really deep exploration where it started into like the human psychology, got more into attachment and attachment language, and I got more into deep EMDR for myself and really...
Were you already studying therapy?
Yeah, I was already a therapist. I was already a therapist at that point, and really started like doing my own work on a deeper level because I didn't realize what was hidden. And a male therapist at the time reflected back like, you got some daddy issues. And I was like, what? And I started doing that because I didn't know what you don't know. And it's kind of in the unconscious shadow realm. So I started doing that. And then really coming into a grander definition of what God is. I actually moved away from the word God for a long time, started using the word source and universe and she, and really playing with concepts. And that's actually really where I am now, is this really expansive view of unconditionality and interwovenness and interconnectedness and synchronicity and love and compassion and gratitude, and also just like deep care of like caring about our experience here as well, like the ability to actually be like, no, it is hard to be human down here, like suffering, like we get it, but also love. So it's like this back and forth. I find source and the universe and God deeply in our cells, in our DNA. You were reading the spirit molecule.
I'm reading Spirit Molecule, and Journey of Souls.
So Journey of Souls right now. I'm about to start having him read the like Energetics of Wealth soon, which is going to be fun.
Energetics of Wealth.
Yeah, the Energetics of Wealth.
Right up your alley.
Yeah, we're going to talk. I'm really pumped for our book club.
From
I'm
Wealth
like,
of Nations to the Energetics of Wealth.
yes, I was like, I have the next book for you. You're going to love it. Here's where we're going to go with this. And yeah, God is bigger. And then obviously the psychedelics. That then even led me into more deep meditation.
What was your initial venture into psychedelics for the purposes of healing or just exploration?
And I hadn't done any psychedelics until I did. Like I've only really ever used psychedelics for ceremony. So truly, I went from like the occasional weed that I really didn't like because I like spiral, to I was in my Reiki mastery and my dear friend was like, hey, I know we're like going to Mexico to like rest in 3 days. Do you want to do ayahuasca? And I was like, I was in a period of saying yes to stuff. And if you guys know about prep for ayahuasca, you have to do a whole dieta and like you have to like get off stuff. So it's 3 days before, which I would very much clinically not recommend to people before they do the dietas because that's actually dangerous. And we very naively went and we literally got taken to this jungle. He like picked us up in a taxi. We got driven into like a street. We were thinking it was going to be like a maloca. He gets out with mats and he just walks into the jungle in like the jungles of Mexico. And we were like, all right, we're either going to die or this is going to be amazing. And we camped out in the middle of a jungle overlooking the beach. And we had this just profound experience. And I was like, what is this? Like my intention at that point was help me connect. And this was my woo intention, but I was like, help me connect to like my past lives and like help me find my power. And so I like traveled in all these lives and like cool stuff, like weird priestess lady and a pyramid and like all just fun stuff and a purging, and I'm watching him hold and I'm watching him do the Icaros and I'm coming out and I'm like, my neuroscience brain researcher part is like, what is this? Yeah. This is amazing. But also I'm going to need a year to integrate, which I did. It took me a whole year to integrate just that one sit. And then the next year I did 3 sits and I did deep inner child sexual trauma healing, like breathing and purging out like incestuous energy, like crazy deep stuff. And it was in that the third ceremony that I actually felt a beloved, like my husband energy. And this was years and years ago before I met my husband now. And he came over me and he introduced himself to me. Whoa. And he's holding me as it felt physically, like literally, like I was birthing out something. It was like true, stuck, calcified, dark energy in my womb from trauma that I was birthing, and it was very painful. And it was like, Aya was like, have fun, 3rd sit, last sit, like we're going in. And I'm like, you can't not go there now. So I'm just breathing, and all of a sudden I feel this energy come around me, almost like in Lama's class, and he's holding me and he's letting me breathe. He's like, I'm like, who is this? This feels so nice, like this masculine, lovely, soft energy. And then he comes around me and he shows himself to me, and he has these really bright green eyes, and he's like, I'm your beloved, like your husband. And I was like, and I was like, hi. And he's like, this is like like I'm showing myself to you as this like very old, wise, like not old man, but like old energy, wise, like monk, like very deep in spirituality, and like I can hold you. And then I remember him saying, I'm like, how will I know it's you? And he's like, you will recognize me through my eyes. And I was like, okay. So I looked for green eyes for forever. I was like, green eyes, very literal, because now I know it's like people, when you see, I've had people like see a specific person that they like met at a conference. I'm like, that's not actually your husband. It's like a metaphor. And I was like, don't. So I was like looking for green eyes. And it was really crazy because then, flash forward years later, I met my husband now, and in a completely different place in my life. And he was so secure and so consistent. And it actually took me about 3 months, and I remember for the longest time, and I did not connect these dots, but he has this like really penetrating glare. Like he really looks into your eyes, and it was hard for me, even as a therapist who loves intimacy. It was like having a hard time because it felt like he was like digging into your soul. Yeah. And I was like, oh, and he's like, you have a hard time looking into my eyes. I'm like, yeah, I don't know why, like what's happening. And as my heart started opening up, I was able to look at him more in my eyes. And then I think it was my birthday trip. I actually said, I love you for the first time. He said, I love you. And I'm asleep, and I shoot up at 4 a.m. and I go, you will recognize me through my eyes. And I was like, shit, I think he's my husband. And that's a story. So I say, and then ayahuasca, I think 2 years after that, actually told me that I needed to move from Dallas, like 6 months after that sit, and that I needed specifically to move to Austin because my husband was going to be there. And funny enough, that was the same week he actually moved to Austin. So I always say ayahuasca actually helped me find my beloved.
Yeah, I definitely don't believe in coincidence.
Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
Experiences I've had.
Yeah.
With those things.
Yeah.
It's still crazy, but it's also just like, well, yeah, that's safe.
If you do it, it's crazy. If people don't, they're like, who is this? Quack?
Yeah.
That's the thing that I wrestle so much with in like doing this kind of thing is like, what are the best words to use to explain this stuff? Because
you're like, where are people going to be when they hear this?
All the words are so triggering.
Yeah.
Even God, people are like scoffing.
Yeah, you've really asked me some pretty existential big questions today.
It's all like,
that's all
you like to talk about?
I just don't think anything, it's like everything's downstream.
I have a question. In one of our sessions, you talked about how psychedelics are like level 4 or something on the shamanic experience of the source, and anything that has like levels to it.
Yes, but what did I say
triggering
immediately
for me
after that?
I don't remember.
I specifically was like, I don't actually mean that literally. I was like, shamans don't. I literally said that right afterwards. I was like, shamans don't have levels.
I didn't hear any of that.
But what I was getting to was, especially, and I can talk about this because you gave me permission beforehand, but with your work, you're very all in, and especially with your addiction history, we worked together for 2 years before even ever playing around with psychedelic assisted. Very, very intentional, contained, embodied approach to doing this, and it's been such a good fit for you. So I feel like you've gotten excited and you've seen, and had these new experiences and you've seen the benefits. And so in that, we get to have more fun. And I would say it's been fun to watch you through even the last four months that we've been doing it.
Yeah.
From pre and post test of that, all of a sudden you started getting the concept of wanting to treat your body better, which we've been talking about for 2 years.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden decided you wanted to start meditating. So there's been these pieces that have weirdly connected you back to yourself and these old behaviors that you forgot about as it relates to spiritual disciplines or just just relating to your psyche in a different way outside of trying to get out of hypervigilance, which has been beautiful to watch. And so we've been getting into more fun existential conversation through that. And so he was like, all right, I'm ready to do like the next intense level up.
Yep.
And one of my warnings I had for him, I was like, look, like I'm here to manage expectations. Like, yes, it's beautiful medicine, but I also want you to know that like this isn't the only way to meet God. This isn't the only way to meet your shadow. It's an amazing modality. And then this is where I said, I was like, even in shamanic circles, I was like, there's certain kinds of disciplines in Taoism and in different kinds of ways and things that like psychedelics is actually caps. I think there was somebody at the MAPS conference a couple years ago that was like, I don't even do it anymore. I did it for 30 years. I learned what psychedelics had to teach me, and now I just want to be here experiencing and actually being here. And I'm like, I really respect that. So there was this intention behind me being like, hold up. Like, I'm not trying to get you to do the Bowser Mario levels of continuing this enlightenment like chase, because that's not what it's about.
Because that's what I'll get addicted to next.
Exactly. And that's why. So that's I
love levels. And
yeah, you do. And honestly, if I was a crazy therapist who wanted to just keep taking your money, I would sell you on that.
Totally. Oh, so I have other questions. What has been your experience with how just a random dude walking around all of a sudden goes to therapy?
Sometimes it's the wives. So I actually hop on a call with the wives first, or the wives make the appointments, and they're like, yeah, my relationship isn't so hot right now. I'm really struggling with anger, or they're, really disconnected from my kids. And like, I'm here. I don't really believe in therapy, but like, my wife chose you, so let's try this out. And they're like very, exec, blah, blah.
Wait, so a lot of wives set this up?
Yeah, wives set this up because oftentimes what brings us to kind of putting our hands up and being like, all right, fine, I guess I'll get an opinion of somebody else. It's oftentimes relational, whether, we get to a place where we're, putting ourselves in a corner and we're really stuck. And so the stuckness, I feel like, is what brings it's like, fine, I guess I'll hear somebody else. And so they'll come in. And a lot of it at the beginning is just realizing that I actually know what I'm talking about and building that rapport. And when I get that piece in, because I know now, like through a lot of anecdotal evidence and trial and error, I can really conceptualize, and not in a way that's like judgy, but really can conceptualize like, all right, this person's like really an intellectualizer. They're very performance oriented. This is what's made them so successful. And so I'll warn them first session. I'll be like, I'm going to tell you right now, your workload, I think I said this to you. I was like, your workload might actually like dip a little bit because you're going to have to recalibrate what battery you're using. It's going to be from a place of adrenal burnout and cortisol. And we're actually going to shift that. Oh yeah, you might feel worse before you get better. Do you really want to be here? And we'll do the work. And I expect you, like, if you're here and you're investing your money in here, I really only work with motivated people, and not in a way that you can't struggle, but in a way of like, you're investing, we're going to put in the work. Like when I ask you to listen to a podcast or read a book, like do it. 'Cause if not, what are you doing here? And typically the buy-in's pretty consistent. I think they just respect that.
Yeah.
I'm telling you the truth. I'm not trying to sell you on anything except for the work. And one of the best advice I always got from my supervisor years ago was, don't work harder than your client. Now that's not to say if they're, in a place of suicidality or they like really need support, we got to get in there and, bring in that community and support. But what I mean more than that is if you're sitting here and you keep resisting and I'm putting so much energy into trying to fix, that's actually not the right energy to come into. So there really is this, and this is why I love working with men, this is why I loving working with adults, is being able to reflect back to you that you ultimately have full autonomy over what you want to do. Whether that's staying in the abusive relationship or leaving or, staying in your corporate job or trying to do something huge and different or going to Peru to do ayahuasca or whatever. Let's talk about it. I'm here. So I don't know if that answered your question. What else brings people in? Wives? What else other than wives?
What's something that like a guy that maybe has never considered therapy,
why would they come in there?
Like what
I think it's like stuff like this too. I mean, that's kind of the point of this.
That's the whole point.
It's going to be different for everybody. And one idea said in the right way that just fucking penetrates. You're like, I guess like that. Maybe
yeah.
I guess that's the question I'm trying to ask is like, what might someone be thinking, feeling, or doing that might be a hint that maybe you should go to fucking therapy?
She referred to herself as a translator, and it's like you basically have to like learn all of the different mental languages of all the humans, which is always a little bit different. You got to navigate all of that to like say the right thing in the right way that's going to actually fucking
yes,
stick it.
Exactly. And if you're going about it from one consistent pattern and one consistent way, then you're only hitting a certain small amount of your clients versus other ways. I would say if you're feeling emotionless, like if you're kind of just feeling flat, that's an indicator that you're not really living connected to your emotions or even like your physical body, which would medically also be risky for missing potential things that would mostly always move into some kind of disease, out of alignment. If you're feeling like you're trying to say something to your wife or you're feeling like you're activated and agitated all the time or disengaged with your kids or always in the future time orientation or in the past time orientation, you're not able to actually enjoy the present or have joy in the present and connect, that's a move to go to therapy. If you're finding yourself being a little too harsh with the kiddos or with your employees and you feel like your body's buzzing all the time and you're needing a ton of coffee to get through the day and you're feeling out of your nervous system, or you feel like the only way to live your life is only by taking medications or by drinking or by smoking or by using dip or any of that, that's another sign to go to therapy. So really there's just sense of stuckness and routine and rut and default that we just kind of live in a default. And if it's not an alive feeling, like it's not it's not present, and that's sad.
I think a lot of people accept the idea that like, yeah, I get angry sometimes. Yeah,
Yes.
I'm anxious sometimes, so I'm gonna have a drink.
Or I have anxiety.
Yeah. I have anxiety. Yeah, it's like it's a chemical imbalance. I have anxiety. I take this med. Sometimes I drink. Fuck you. What? I'm gonna go sit on a couch and it's like that. So many people have that mentality, and it's like this. The thing that the big like epiphany for me was like, oh, like you can actually resolve the underlying thing that is making you frustrated in like X, Y, and Z situation.
Yeah.
Like, if people actually knew that and believed
It's
it,
possible.
like, where the fuck do I sign?
If they knew and believed it,
It's
everyone
possible.
would be like,
Where do I
Yeah,
sign?
and that it's not woo-woo, or even if the word holistic is triggering, like it's not. This is like actual proven, so much more, I think. And I also think with the DSM and the over identification with disease that came from, even the last 15 years, that now is actually being disproven around really recognizing that, oh, depression is actually a chronic hypo-aroused state. Like this is actually that we're chronically under-resourced, and that the symptom can be depression, or it can be, yes, chemical components in the brain that might need medication, but also might be trauma. And is it really actually, are your moods actually swinging up and down because you're bipolar, or is it that because you have PTSD symptoms and your nervous system is bouncing up and down? So as we're understanding nervous system stuff more, as we're understanding the inner workings of that, oftentimes these chronic identifications with disease, specifically anxiety and depression, and other things, of course, OCD-like things, ruminations, control, perfectionism, overworking, work addiction, all of that is actually rooted in things being out of alignment.
So this podcast is part of our larger company, Chill Country Cannabis, where we make really delicious organic edibles from scratch right here in Austin for now, pending legislation. They're available in 3 different flavors and strains. So we have an indica strain that is an apple cinnamon flavor. We have a hybrid profile that is a ruby red grapefruit flavor. And then we have a sativa profile that is agave and lime. And we use all organic ingredients. We make everything from scratch at our kitchen down the street. You can go try Chill Country Cannabis for yourself. You can actually try one of each flavor. We have on the website a bundle called the Texas Trio, and if you use code YNT at checkout, it'll be $20 for the trio instead of $35. So you can try them out, figure out which ones you like. You can come back and buy more. An ayahuasca ceremony oftentimes is extremely excruciating and uncomfortable most of the time. Mm-hmm. And my first 2 were exactly that. The first one, the entire time, was so confusing, so painful, so like, I don't like, what is this? Is this evil? Like, what is going on? Mm. The second one was like half that, and then half like, oh, I see. And then this last one was like, I told you, it was like pure bliss. Like I just got to experience what it was like to not have to, I don't know. But while everybody around me was like,
you needed that lesson. You needed, and I've had those too, where I've had rupture because I was like fighting the medicine. I like bit a facilitator because I was like trying to be clawed back down. Like I was convinced that Anna wasn't Anna, and I was actually in a meth den, and that where I would go to was actually Anna's life, like Anna's life. So I saw my therapy office, and I saw my dogs, and I loved my life. And I was like, oh no. And then I like got shot into the universe, and it was like, we're doing this over and over again for forever. And it was like, haha, what a horrible joke. I was like, why are we doing that? I was like fighting and fighting to come back down. And I bit my facilitator because I was like trying to crawl my way back to Anna's life. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. And she's like, you took too much. And I was like, I think I did. And coming back and making meaning and integrating. And I was like, man, I needed that tough one because I needed to learn what real surrender was. And even if I was actually fighting to surrender in real life and fighting to surrender in there, if I would have just it took me like 6 months to actually integrate this. I was like, I was walking with a friend. I was like, the struggle wasn't the medicine. It was me fighting the light. Yes. And in that, I got exactly what I needed, even if it really freaked me out. And I had like kind of panic issues afterwards for a while until I had to like feel my body kind of, come back to stasis. Was, I now know what the real meaning of 1, ego death is, and 2, surrender. And in a visceral, experiential way, I can feel what the felt sense of that is now, and I can do that so much better. Like since then, I now, when everybody's like, just let go and let God, I'm like, what the hell does that mean? And I'm like, oh wait, I get it. It's like, stop fighting so much in that resistance. I will also say, from what you said, I oftentimes find that the medicine working with our higher healing intelligence, or with the plant spirit, depending on your viewpoint, your philosophy, and the kind of modality of psychedelics, works really beautifully with the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous systems. So it pushes your edges. Sometimes if you take too much, it blows people out. They need repair, of course. But if you have the right set and setting, the right dosing, it does go back and forth and give you what you need. So you'll oftentimes find that people at the beginning of their journeys oftentimes just maybe might not see much and have a lot of like energetic release or purging release or deal with a lot of their mental structures. And then once that kind of starts to get worked out, it'll start to take levels deeper. And what you beautifully said that I actually think is a parallel to our bodies working within the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, as you said, dark and light. I actually would say it's duality. So the concept of the 3D is separateness, and that there's good and there's bad and there's light and there's dark. And so the idea of that spectrum is duality. And so what you're playing within in those structures are the concepts of nothingness and everythingness. And what you might actually find is you might have your next sit might be somewhere in between, because your nervous system, your higher healing intelligence, and that plant spirit wanted to give you a taste of nothingness. This almost like ego death in that way. And I remember when we did other medicines and stuff, you're also like, nothing's happening. And I'm like, we need to process that.
I did one ketamine.
Yes.
I still have like a bag of ketamine.
But you were like, I'm pissed because nothing happened.
But then it was like, yeah, that was exactly what was supposed to happen.
Correct. And in that, you got exactly what you needed, because in that moment, what needed to be amplified, what was going on around why you were so blocked. Because if I remember correctly, you were pretty blocked with, there was the fight with anxiety, there was a fight with creativity, there was a fight with what was going on with work in your own mind and in your own body. And so, of course, that would be what the medicine would show you, is this like, and there's nothing more humbling than that. But yeah, this duality is the dance. One of my dear clients, she's an artist, and we did a whole long, I think 10 series ketamine protocol last year. And she came out of one of the last ones, and she goes, I figured out what this is, like how to describe psychedelics. And I was like, how? She goes, it's like watercoloring with your mind. And I was like, that's beautiful. This ability to watercolor with your mind, and then, with ayahuasca or things like that, watercoloring with your mind and spirit.
The DMT book, they actually talk about the visuals being like almost superficial and more of a distraction. I don't know. It's like in that book, he talks about like counseling he was counseling like the subjects to be like, hey, for this sit, cool, like enjoy the colors, but like try to go past them, because that's where there's like a lot more information over there. So I don't know.
I agree with that, and how you and I integrate, and how I integrate in general. So you're like, this is so, and we have some fun videos I need to send you still. Yes. He's like, because he wants the videos for content of like, and he dances and he talks. He's like, this is great. This music's amazing, and it's just fun to watch. It's fun to sit with him. And in that though, it's fun to do everything. It is fun to do everything with Chris. He's a therapy homie for sure. Turning into a real homie. Look at us hanging out outside of therapy.
Here we go.
And part of that is so much about coming back to like, do you remember what the theme of that in your body was? Like what was actually really happening underneath the visuals? Because that's really where the work is, and that's so much even in the Icaros. Because when we're looking at it from an indigenous lens, shamans. So I will explain it. So the way that indigenous shamans, particularly in the training I have, so this is the capacity that I can speak to. I'm sure there's other ways that they get trained, but through the Peruvian form with the Shipibo tribe, they are trained to essentially take the medicine, and then through the medicine, they can look at your body and scan it. And then with that, they will see designs, and they'll see light and dark and movement and stuff, and they'll watch where there's energetic blocks. And so what the Icaros is when they're spending time, because every one of these shamans spends long amounts of time with different plants, learning about the energy of said plants. So it's not just ayahuasca that they spend time with. They can spend time with Bobinsana. They can spend weeks. They do these in different rituals where they're pretty much on really extensive dietas in isolation, except with their shaman. And they essentially just have very basic fish and plantain. They always like kind of lose a lot of weight, and they spend a lot of time taking whatever plant. And over the course of time, they have hallucinations or dreams or downloads of different kinds this is from their philosophy, from said plant. And that's where they get the songs that they sing. Every single shaman has their own song. And the song is vibrational medicine. So it's frequency healing is what Icaros means. So they're on ayahuasca, they're watching you, and then through their frequency healing, they're moving the energetics. And if you are also on ayahuasca, you can feel or see sometimes. They might not know what you're going through. Sometimes they do. I know if I've been facilitating, sometimes I'll actually sometimes be able to see what's happening, and sometimes I won't. I'll just maybe feel what they're feeling. Or you might actually be able to see the Icaros. They can on a whole nother level, the ones that are actually fully trained and do that. And the Icaros helps move the energy. And so you sit up and you receive their Icaros. And so you're going through your own journey. They're also energetically moving things through you. And then oftentimes you might purge, or you might, have some kind of big release after they finish, or during the finish, big cry or whatever. And so it's like double the amazing medicine. So if you ever look at different designs in Guatemala or in Peru or in Colombia, and you see the beautiful woven, they look like mazes. That's actually Icaros. That's what they call Icaros. That's actually the designs of the energy that they see in your body.
The thing that is mind-blowing to me is like what you just described, you can experience in a way where it's like, oh, this is like voodoo magic. Like this is like your body is like shaking and convulsing to the vibrations, and you're like feeling the fucking it could be like misinterpreted as like demonic possession, which I think I kind of was like, is this even like initially when I did it, and now it's like, no, I feel like I can understand. Like what you just described, it's like, yeah, that's like it's like a sentient or a coherent experience. It's not like hallucination. It's like they're shaking the energy out of your body with the vibrations coming out of their mouth, and it's like a real fucking thing. It's
Which
like
science is now showing. Science is now showing.
Yeah, I mean, our buddy has that company that's literally breaking up cancer with sound waves.
This is what I'm saying.
So
sound waves since the beginning of time have been doing massive
amounts of healing. And then in the DMT book, they're talking about they all hear the same sound of the universe when they blast off.
This is like a weird indigenous ceremonial thing in the woods on a yoga mat with people that are with like no science, with like a magic plant potion
that they've known for forever.
And it's like the fact that this exists, it is real. I've experienced it 3 times to the point where it's like this is what women were getting burned at the stake for doing ceremonies like this. Yeah. And it's real, and it's happening, and it's like re-emerging. And to a normal person, they would think you're insane for explain like.
6 months ago, I would have thought that was bullshit.
It's
just like I couldn't have visited her as my therapist 12 years ago. I had to go through the CBT and the group therapy.
And so that's where we come from. This place of like I would say like because of my parents like open-minded spiritual upbringing, like I was more open to it, but I massively resisted all of that.
Yeah.
It's like I'm gonna be a fucking conservative businessman.
Yes.
Because I was like, this is nonsense.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and then you get trapped, and then you get stuck, and you're like, ugh, okay. So here's what I would say. I'm like not gonna explain Icaros and like the philosophy of shamans to a muggle. And I'm saying that truly respectfully, like somebody who's going to look at me and dismiss, and that, because that's not the point anyways. If I'm really trying to be like, hey, here's an option of something that you want. Hey, you struggle with addiction. Do you know the statistics on ibogaine? Do you know the statistics on what ayahuasca is? Like, do you really want to see what happens with the neuroplasticity and the change? Have you read the research on a mother doing ayahuasca for her daughter that can't actually do it herself? And the research on the healing that's done, real, actual scientific research stuff. And I'm like, just go try it out, see what happens. I'll see you on the other side. And then they'll come back and they're like, what was that? And so part of it, it's okay for it to be mystical and unknown if the results are still there. And I also will say there's people that I do not recommend psychedelics to, especially when you get to the bigger ones, because I have a deep found respect for the ritual and the cultural component of it. And if there's you said it beautifully, you've gotten more respect for the experience as like it's gone on, and the ritual at the beginning, you're like, is this evil? And now you're like, wow, there's beauty in this. That's this wisdom for thousands of years. So I really believe that comes into your own experience. And that's okay to be a little, shaky and confused at first because you're in a completely new cultural setting. And in a way that if I was like in Japan in a tea ceremony, just normal tea ceremony that took 4 or 5 hours. And at the beginning of the first time I ever did, I was like, what's happening? How judgy of me versus coming into the space of being like, there is civilizations worth of tea ceremonies and there is wisdom in slowing down and being present enough to enjoy this.
It's like, you're the idiot.
It's ancient wisdom that was
just-
extinguished from culture.
Yes.
Like, the wisdom is just God. It's infinite wisdom. These different things are tapping into infinite wisdom. You as a therapist, without drugs, with buzzers, are helping like shine that wisdom, shine that light, shine that love on your clients. And there's all these different modalities. These plants are just the most direct way to experience directly that wisdom.
And honestly, I'm actually watching a lot of people and friends find God more recently in their own ways. Some of them might be like actually going back to the church when they hadn't before, and I celebrate that for them. Some people might be connecting back to deep meditation and finding more stillness in nature, and I celebrate that for them. And I'm curious about that. Actually, both of your perspectives on, have you also been noticing that? And if so, what are your thoughts as to why?
I think that I was saying that like the plants and the ceremonies have been communicated from society, but the plants and the ceremonies are like the facilitator of God's light, wisdom, and love. And it's like this crazy ancient ceremony that you're talking about, ayahuasca, that was developed by people in the jungle with no science tools, right? They made this magic potion and created this thing that is literally like harnessing the light, love, and wisdom of God and showering it on people. And so it's not like those practices were extinguished, but like it was really God that got like ripped out of society. And we have like this McDonald's version in these churches where everybody's going, nobody's like, for the most part, is really feeling any kind of like deep, real connection. It's like, give me 10% of your income, and
It's become a business.
That's religion, and that's like spiritual connection. But like, I think it's coming back, one, because I think technology and the internet and the massive access to information that we have now is just helping people educate themselves in a way that has never been possible, and is leading to more. We have people like, we have some of like the greatest thinkers, modern day thinkers in the world, creating content online that is you can consume and like literally like accelerate your ability to gain wisdom and to gain perspective and understanding. And so like I think that technology is while there's a bunch of problems with it, I think it's just a tool, and it's like you can use it for good. And there's a lot of people using it for good and using it to educate themselves. And like someone like me who's not a strong reader, I've listened to a lot of audiobooks and podcasts and just fucking like profound clips that come across your Instagram feed or whatever. If you're like ready to receive the information, and somebody saying something in the right way on Instagram can literally like help, can be like a massive like perspective shift that helps you align yourself. And it's all like this. I think the plants and the technology like re-emerging into culture are what's like bringing it back. And yeah, definitely, I think there's more people that are like questioning, like that question of like, well, why? Like, what's the purpose?
Why? Yeah,
What's
the
purpose?
existential
Why?
questioning again is coming back. Yeah.
It's like the more information you have, the less parameter, like the less closed in your day-to-day worldview is, the more open you're going to be to like, oh, well, like what the fuck is this and why do this over that? And then if you start asking that question, you inevitably get to a place of like, well, I got to figure out what the fuck I do.
I'm curious because you're currently in you're in a different place in that, where and is it okay that I bring this up?
I'm having a ceremony.
Yeah, I'm so glad, because I don't know, but we're talking about this at the very beginning stages of this again, because the word God, your own experience with existential stuff is really starting to actually be at the forefront now, this part of your journey. So what would you say? Because you're one of those people right now, I would say, trying to figure out what the heck God is about right now. Again.
Yeah. So I remember being like 8 years old and praying to God, which I don't know where I learned that because my parents didn't do that shit. And I was praying to God that I wouldn't wet the bed anymore. And that night I wet the bed. And then I think the next day I was like, well, that guy's full of shit. He's not real. And I didn't think about God again until I got into my 12-step program.
Yeah, I was like AA, yeah.
Yeah. And then I thought that was bullshit for probably the first like couple months until I went to like a codependence rehab. And there I remember like sitting on like the steps of our like it was like the men and women obviously had separate residences. So I was sitting at the steps of like our residence where it was awesome. I mean, fucking rehab is great. It's like very relaxing. You wake up, they like have a meditation every day, and then there's food, and the food's really good, and then it's like group work. And it's fucking nice. But at night, everyone does their like nightlies where you do your journaling, and then you have some silent reflection. It's like the most fucking spiritually like prone place you can be as a person like that. And I just remember like sitting on the steps, and there's this part in the big book that talks about were you not for the longest time like a worshiper of logic, and did you not have faith this whole time, but your faith was actually in like logic? And then it goes on to talk about how so then we can start with the fact that you've had faith the whole time. It's just been in different words and a different like kind of concept. And then they start talking about how like, is it not true that a table looks like a table, but it's actually a bunch of electrons spinning around and it's mostly nothing? It's like, and then, you know, did you not at some point like worship like your emotions or money or whatever? It's like you've had faith this whole time. It's just been in things that have failed you essentially. And
False prophets.
False prophets. And then it's like, but did you not also like gaze and wonder at the stars and wonder how all this fucking happened? It's like, and so like basically there's this part in the big book called We Agnostics that I read over that night, and it kind of like cracked the door open to being open to that. The problem for me was that anything organized, it creates like a, at least for me, I did have a personal relationship with a higher power, but it was dependent on participation in a certain like set of behaviors in a certain group of people, which kind of, and it's like there's no one in charge of AA, and I still go to AA, and I still have sponsor and sponsees. Right, and it's like the program is the most of, to me, it's the most simplified version of spiritual principles and like access to God that exists, which is why it's so just successful. But I just kind of like, I don't know, my connection waned. And so now I'm kind of in the spot where like I experienced the peace that comes with that, but it went away, and I'm realizing that I want to have my own relationship and my own connection that's based on my own first experience, which I did get a little bit of that just from sponsoring people. Like you do feel God when you talk to people and you like try to be helpful to other people, but I just wanted to explore it more. And then layered on top of that was the fact that like I've always had this deep curiosity from when I first did the 10-day silent meditation with Vipassana, and it was very clear from that experience that there was more going on, but it's so hard to access because like they want you to meditate like an hour and a half every morning and every night, and it's just like it's fucking really hard. And so then I'd done a bunch of cognitive behavioral therapy, and it was like it was not super helpful for me because I just AA kept me safe, and it prevented me from fucking my life up. We've talked about this. But there was just some like serious blockage that never got fixed. And AA is very, very clear about like it doesn't have a monopoly on spiritual growth, and like if you need outside help, you should get it. So I fucking searched for it, and typical talk therapy, like for me, just it had its place, but it kept me from killing myself in my early 20s, but it wasn't like doing it for me anymore. And so I somehow was kind of like hearing maybe from you or wherever that there were like other modalities out there that were more intense and that might help somebody. And what I really knew, you talk about being blocked. What I really knew was that like I had a very intellectual understanding of a higher power that was very safe because I had no emotional attachment to it. And I hadn't cried since rehab. So 16 years, 15 years. So I knew that I was really blocked. And when I got into talk therapy, I don't know how to explain it other than there were places I knew I wanted to go and needed to go, but I just would not let myself, and it wasn't going to fucking happen. And even in EMDR, like some stuff got opened up, but I never like got to the really difficult shit.
You haven't yet to have a direct experience with that, whatever that is, right? Like you, like in a way that's profound enough for you to be like, oh yeah, that's real.
Right.
And that's the thing that it's a big question. It's like, because it's such a hard thing to accomplish. Like it took me finding a group and going into the woods and drinking a magic potion. Like almost no one's gonna do that. Yeah. Right. And that's the only way that I've been able to oh, okay, yeah. I not only believe in God, but I have my own ideas now of like what it is, and I pray to it in a certain way, and I have I'm now every day trying to align myself with whatever I think that is through methods that I think help me align with it. And like that, the journey there of 40, it's like, how do you help people get there sooner than fucking 40?
Yeah.
And how do you help people get there easier than having to go do fucking ayahuasca?
Yeah.
Is there a way? I don't know.
Well, I actually would disagree with what you said, which is, you know yourself, but I'm also your therapist for like 2.5 years, so I can say this. I would say that actually starts to where we were talking about earlier, which is if it starts foundationally that we are disembodied, and they say in meditation, they say in yoga, they say in plant spaces, they say at church, you got to have Jesus in your heart. You got to have, you actually have to portal into meditation through the heart space, heart-brain coherence, Joe Dispenza meditation, same ideas, is that the spirit is actually found through the body, not through the mind. Yes, there's the pineal gland, but it's still through the body in a way, not through your thoughts. And so I would argue that when you had Birdie, you had a mystical experience. I would argue that sometimes when you're really sick and you're like, this sucks, and you're like up at night, like there's pieces of that. But because plant medicine spaces are so loud because we ourselves are disembodied, we can't hear those subtleties of God or the universe of mystical experiences enough because our bodies are desensitized to them. So we have to go to take magic potions in the jungle. For those of us who've lived 40 years being desensitized, to be like, oh, okay, I heard level 12, I heard the volume of level 12. Now let me see if I can hear volume 2 in the day-to-day and the adoration of your girl.
So that's it. So it's not that you have direct experiences with God every day, because that's what this is.
Correct.
But you haven't connected that, like when we did the walk the other day and we both like went from anxious to like, oh shit, we changed our perspective and now our anxiety's gone. That's literally God filling you with his light. Yeah. And that phrase only makes sense to me because of the direct, intense experience that I've had.
Because you can feel it now. You
can like, oh. So now it's like, I know, it's like, because I'm like, oh, that, like you said, that's level 12. That's turning it up to 12. And now, like, that walk was like a 4.
Yeah. Well, the Vipassana.
But it's the same thing.
Exactly. You have to go in a sense, right now with America and the world, I understand why we have to get outside of our default lives that are just buzzing and loud and children screaming and work needs. And like we have to go to the 10-day silent Vipassana retreat and feel something different to be like, bring it back with us. But oftentimes a lot of people don't, as we were talking about accessibility, like we don't have access to that. So where can we find these sensations? My easiest simple answer is going back to the body. You first have to start with getting reconnected to sensation, because you're never going to get there if you can't even feel level 2 anything.
Yeah, there is a super strong, direct mystical experience then connects the dots for all of the little things that happen.
Correct. Which then makes our lives way more meaningful and purposeful, and we can enjoy the colors of the green leaves and the things and genuinely actually be more present.
Because it's like walk with Jesus, right? It's like all of that stuff. It's just different words saying the same thing. It's like there is just this one infinite source. Every religion ever has tried to describe it.
Yeah.
It's one thing, and it's like there's what stories and characters do you want to use
Attitude
to
of
like understand
gratitude.
it and to connect with it.
Positive mental life.
And this segues perfectly into
I've also been on heavy antidepressants for about 16 years.
That'll also probably dull some effects.
And I'm on like day 2 of not being on them.
And look at the
After a
weird
taper,
synchronicity of the conversation.
And I'm having a weird time over
I bet. Well, but you
trying to
have
stay with it.
you have the resourcing now to be able to actually manage what's coming up.
which is crazy because like I mean I'm like a witness to your healing as you're a witness to mine, and we've been attached to the hip for 5+ years now, and the progress that both of us have made over the last 5 years is insane.
Yeah, it's like
And
you wouldn't people wouldn't believe it. If I described what you were
I mean,
like
it's
when we
why
first
we're
started
doing
working,
this,
yeah.
because we're both like, everybody needs to
explain
know
this?
about this.
Yeah.
Like, it's
Yeah.
fucking possible.
Yeah.
These underlying, it's like the underlying issues are the things that are holding us back, and there's actually
You can actually heal.
strategies.
You can heal.
Yes.
It's possible.
And even like you're saying, like there's nothing wrong with pharmaceuticals. Lexapro is a magical substance as well. It's synthetic, but it doesn't make it any less magical. It was like absolutely profound for me, and I luckily for whatever reason had the wherewithal to use it in the way that I think it's supposed to be used, which is you use it to get the space. You get the space. You do some of the healing. You do some of the healing. You get to a place where you can wean off of it. And then the emotions come back, but they're not as intense, and you can continue the healing without the blockage. That's how it should be used. But most doctors are like, just take this forever, you're fine.
You can also see it like it's not meant to be come off of in the way that it was designed, because like I have to go to if I want to taper off the way you're supposed to taper off, I have to go to a compounding pharmacy and find a liquid version of it and like get a fucking so what I'm doing is I'm like taking this little fucking tablet and like breaking off a piece and shape. It's like that's druggy shit. No normal person's gonna do that. So you just stay on it forever.
You stay on forever. And it's also so pleasant to be on.
Yeah. Well, and the Western medical community isn't coming from a model of holistically understanding. They just are like, people aren't going to have the resources. They're not going to be able to have the space. They're not going to be able to have the time. Of course, we're just going to
The
very
doctor has to
simply-
see 100 people
yeah,
a day
it's
for
like,
the
we're
fucking
just
business
take the
to
meds.
work,
The
dude.
liability is easier if I tell you you're supposed to be on it forever. You're not really
Also,
going to
I
do
might
the
get
deep
taken
work.
out to dinner by the fucking rep.
That maybe that too, but you're not going to do the deep. I don't trust you to do the deep work that's going to be necessary. But guess what? It's an investment in energy, time, and resources.
And the doctor prescribing the Lexapro oftentimes hasn't done the deep work themselves.
Fair.
Yeah.
Fair.
Well, and there's a power dynamic with any kind of practitioner that like you
believe.
Who's going to push back on their doctor and be like, I think maybe I should look at maybe not doing this.
Yeah, and
Who
it's
the
so
fuck's gonna
scary.
say that to
and
their
I will
doctor?
also say I have had clients who decide themselves to taper off, and it's a shit show. And I always am like, if that's something that you're ever curious about, you need to be looking. I'm saying this as a need
PSA.
to say, it is dangerous. You need to be working with a trauma-informed specialist who also understands like compounds like that, who also, and somebody who also understands your compounds. Like you're working with your doctors. We're not just like willy-nilly deciding to taper you off. And you were 2.5 years into deep therapy with me.
Yeah.
Deep EMDR, weekly therapy. I'm not saying that's where you have to be to taper off, but oftentimes you had to know, and and we've even trial and errored this before and then gone back on. So there's an understanding of this ability to really like try and know what it takes to actually be able to tolerate the distress that emotions are for the first time and nervous system dysregulation, and believe that you have the tools to actually be able to regulate yourself again. How beautiful is it that you're there? And some people just don't have the space to do that. So yeah, stay on it forever.
Somebody at my last ayahuasca retreat in one of the sharing circles said, healing is a privilege. And it was like, that
It's so
sucks.
true. And it does suck. It does suck. What do I say before every medicine sit?
Thank you.
Yeah, we connect to like the privilege of even having the capacity and the time that we're at to even have these compounds.
This whole topic is like a crazy
privileged, expensive. Yeah. 100%.
Nobody has time for this.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what's the fucking answer for the vast majority of
I love what MAPS is saying. MAPS is, MAPS mission statement, which is to lower net trauma in the world.
Yeah.
Because they know more trauma is being created every day.
Yeah.
They're just trying to make that number lower.
Yeah, you can't. There's no perfection.
Yeah.
It's like, but I guess it's more just the like racking your brain on like what can be done to lower the bar, lower the threshold.
Yep.
And that's where we get to like capitalism for good, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, if we can sell $1 billion worth of gummies, Chris and I aren't looking to buy yachts. Right?
Yeah.
It's like we would love like. How do you have more people?
I was like, Chris would love that.
That would stress me out. I would rent one and then I would leave.
You want to be invited on a yacht?
I want to be invited on one that no one else is allowed on.
But what could be done to, because capitalism is this agnostic, that was another thing that I wrestled with. It's like, is capitalism evil? Because a lot of people come to that conclusion. And after my first ayahuasca ceremony, it was basically telling me everything I'm doing is wrong. And it was like the way I interpreted it. And it was like, is capitalism evil? It's like, well, no, capitalism is like not good or bad. It's how it's wielded. And it's just a system.
It's like money.
It's a system for accumulating resources. Do you accumulate those resources and then use them for self-serving purposes? Or do you accumulate the resources and use them to help others, right?
Yeah.
And if that mentality and strategy, and the thing is, if you align yourself with whatever that is, it's the only way that you can think about it. I bring this up regularly because it's one of my favorite things. But my buddy Brandon Cohn is subscribed to a sect of Hinduism, and he once said, I was talking to him about like, how does people in your religion feel about accumulating wealth and like being successful in business and all that kind of thing? Like he was like, well, the belief is they're God's resources, they're not our resources.
I love that.
So if you are blessed with more resources of God's resources, you need to be using them to carry out God's will, not your will. So God's will is not for you to buy a yacht, right? God's will is for you to set up a fund that helps musicians get access to like real healing modalities, right? Or whatever. Or it's like what MAPS is doing. Like there is in like almost every religion ever that believes in God has that concept of like God's will, not yours, right? And the way that we align ourselves with God is by understanding, or it's like the more aligned we are with that source, the better we can understand the directives of God versus the
and the easier everything is too.
Yeah, I appreciate you really saying that. It's such a thing. We were starting this podcast when we just kind of sat down talking about it. I've been really wrestling with it as I went from a private practice that was just me for a long time, that then had maybe a couple of associates underneath me, that now I have like a full running seven clinicians. I'm about to open up a second place. I'm still seeing the same amount of caseload that I was, when I was just me, hour per hour. And it's an emotional drain when then I also have to be holding and supervising and trying to create and be the boss in a different way. And so it's so much energetic expenditure that it's not sustainable. But the essence, of like, okay, but the whole reason I got into this was to help people. So how to do that? And so what I love about what you're saying, that I'm even just picking up, that's been brewing, is like by figuring out how to expand, build resources, have good clinicians that are also offering accessible care. What's the impact that I really actually have now? Right? Instead of 35 capped hours of clients a week, that's just 35. Now that's still amazing, because in a whole practice, people do that. Like, thousands of people, you're changing lives. But really this ability, like you guys are doing on this podcast, the reach starts to expand. And if we start to really understand that abundance is actually a birthright, and that in fact the story of abundance is selfish, is actually a story that we've been indoctrinated of by the wealthy to keep us from wanting to get there anyways. But we do, with abundance, have a responsibility. to be able to then give impact and not have wasteful, I call like wasteful rich versus real rich, which is this ability, you know, the real rich, which is those, and the book that we're about to do our book club on talk a lot about this concept of, real rich versus like fake rich or something. And the real rich understand and genuinely have an appreciation for the wealth that they do have, and to know when it's wasteful versus when it's actually like good spending. It's not to say you can't buy your purse or you can't, you know, rent a yacht, but it is to also have like a bigger mission for what is it that what's the energy output? Because if finances, the actual wealth component of that piece is energy, then how do I actually want to keep expanding this energy and have it be in light? Back to what we were talking about.
I have to pee really bad.
Let's pause.
I should also
Great.
drink some water.
Pee break.
What, I thought we were in the trust tree in the nest, are we not?